Order, we resume the debate on clause 52, with which we are also debating clauses 53 and 54 stand part. The Minister had just spoken before we adjourned this morning. Do any other members wish to speak to new clauses 52 to 53? In that case, the question is that clause 52 stand part of the bill. As many as are of the opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. We now come to the question that clauses 53 and 54 stand part, which we have just debated. No. With the leave of the committee, I will take the decision on these clauses together. The question is that clauses 53 and 54 stand part of the bill. As many as are of the opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. We now come to clause 55 stand part. The question is that clause 55 stand part of the bill. The question is that clause 55 stand part of the bill. As many as are of the opinion say aye. Oh.
Nope.
I apologize, Minister.
It's all right.
The question is that clause 55 stand part of the bill. As many as are of the opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. We now come to Government Amendment 12 to clause 56. I call the Minister to move Government Amendment 12.
Well, first of all, we should obviously celebrate the fact that you're in the chair. The first time that I think you've ever chaired a bill committee, so we will try to misbehave and see how much of it we can get away with. It's sometimes I think a mission impossible, but since Tom Cruise has invested so much in the UK, I'm sure that you're prepared to accept that mission. We are now considering Government Amendment 12, but it might be more convenient if I speak first about the clause to which it is an amendment, which is clause 56 and then 57 stand part and Schedule 1. Clause 56 amends the New Roads and Street Works Act 1991, the 1991 Act, by inserting new sections 106A to 106J. It requires the Secretary of State to keep a register of information relating to apparatus in streets in England and Wales, referred to as the National Underground Asset Register. I'm tempted to talk about the Wombles, but I'm not going to. It establishes a requirement for undertakers, and when I first read that in my notes, as a former vicar, and because we later come on to the Register of Births and Deaths, I thought it meant undertakers as in people who book coffins underground. But it doesn't. It means people who undertake undertakings. It establishes a requirement for undertakers who own apparatus in the street to share information with the National Underground Asset Register. It also allows the Secretary of State to specify who can access this information and how, as well as establish a charging scheme with associated enforcement mechanisms, which are detailed in Schedule 1. Provision is also made to allow specific functions of the Secretary of State to be exercised by third parties. These provisions will be detailed through secondary legislation, and the Secretary of State is required to consult the Welsh ministers before making regulations under this clause. This clause will allow the National Underground Asset Register to operate as a statutory register, delivering estimated benefits in excess of £400 million per year through increased efficiency, reduced asset strikes and reduced disruptions for the public and businesses. This is critical to kick-starting economic growth. It might also be critical to establishing people's love of the streets in which they live and their preparedness to see them dug up occasionally and not endlessly and repeatedly. Clause 57 makes amendments to Section 79 and Section 80 of the 1991 Act. The existing Section 79 requires undertakers to record the location of their in-street apparatus and share this with those executing street works. The amendments established in this clause require undertakers to input this information and any other information as prescribed into NUAR. The existing, but not yet commenced, Section 80 of the 1991 Act imposes a duty on those executing works in a street who find information about apparatus that is missing or incorrect to inform the owner of the apparatus or the relevant street authority. The new Section 80 updates this to require data be shared with NUAR where the relevant asset owner cannot be identified. The current regulation making powers conferred on the Welsh ministers under Section 79 and those inserted by Clause 57 are concurrently exercisable by the Secretary of State or the Welsh ministers in relation to apparatus in Wales. The Secretary of State is required to consult the Welsh ministers before making regulations under Section 79 and 80, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. Finally, just on Schedule 1, before I come to Government Amendment 12, to Clause 57, to Clause 56, sorry. If an undertaker does not pay their NUAR service fee or does not provide the information to the Secretary of State in relation to the fees as prescribed through regulations, Schedule 1 allows the Secretary of State to enforce these requirements through the imposition of monetary penalties. It also includes a provision for undertakers to appeal to a first-tier tribunal. This schedule is critical to ensure undertakers who stand to benefit most pay for the NUAR service. The amount of the service fee and the level of fine will be specified in secondary legislation. This schedule ensures the long-term financial sustainability of NUAR, safeguarding the expected benefits of this service and helping progress our mission for growing the economy. And now, specifically on Government Amendment 12, this removes subsection 3 of the new section 106C inserted into clause 56 at Lord's report stage. The subsection creates a duty for the Secretary of State to provide guidance to relevant stakeholders on cybersecurity measures before they may receive information from NUAR. NUAR hosts extremely sensitive data and is therefore supported by a suite of sophisticated security measures developed in partnership with the security services and owners of underground apparatus, which ensure that a given user's access to data is proportionate. The amendment as proposed, or the amendment as the Lords proposed, could expose detailed cybersecurity arrangements that are not public knowledge. It could also curtail the government's ability to adapt security measures where needed, with support from security stakeholders to accommodate changing circumstances. As such, we do not consider this subsection to be suitable as drafted, and consequently, we have tabled our amendment, Government Amendment number 12. So, Chair, I beg to move Government Amendment number 12, and then subsequently, if accepted, clauses 56, 57, and Schedule 1.
Thank you. Government Amendment 12 proposed to clause 56 as on the amendment paper. The question is that the amendment be made. I call Ben Spencer.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. So the National Underground Asset Register is clearly a very important provision that we need going forwards. I think it's plain to see the benefits in terms of having access to the information for trusted partners regarding this critical infrastructure. I'm glad that this is being continued in the latest iteration of the Data Use and Access Bill. The information the NUAR holds is critical infrastructure, which clearly we need to think very carefully around the data security, access to this information, both in terms of how it's held on the register, the security measures of the people who get access to it, and also third parties over and above the people who are directly accessing the register. I'm unclear as to why the government's against this amendment in the way that it's drafted. If anything, I think it could be argued that it should go further in terms of ensuring that sufficient security measures are in place for people who are accessing this, rather than what I think is a reasonable ask, that there should be a requirement to inform around relevant cybersecurity measures. I hear what he's saying with regards to disclosure of security measures, but I don't think cybersecurity advice and provisions, at least as I understand it, is particularly an area of sort of national secrecy. I think there's many standard cybersecurity standards that can be provided as guidance or as a bare minimum for people who should be accessing these measures. We support the continued inclusion of these measures. If anything, I think it should go further. If anything, it should consider more broadly the different ways in which this information can be accessed. I don't know what he can say at the dispatch box in response to that in terms of the proportionality of disclosures that can be made from the government with regards to advice in the operation of this subsection.
Thank you. Can I just make sure that anybody who wants to speak on this section just briefly stand so I see who wants to speak? Thank you. I call Danny Beals.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and congratulations on your first chairship today. It's not necessarily the most exciting sounding clause of the bill on initial reading, the National Underground Asset Register, but I think despite the name, it's incredibly consequential for our country and our communities, which is why I felt minded to speak about this clause today. I've got a few reflections about the importance of the clause and then some issues I hope the Minister might touch upon in his summing up and response as well. Firstly, I think putting this register on a statutory footing is vitally important, with new legal requirements on utility and telecommunication companies to add their data to the register and to crucially keep it up to date too. We live in an increasingly digital age. There's vast seas and rivers of cables connecting our communities together, running through our streets, 4 million kilometres of cabling in our streets. And now there's a myriad of organisations working day in, day out to maintain, to update, to replace these cables and utilities. Over 700 organisations now working, and I'm sure in the years to come that will only increase, which is why coordination, the rationalisation, the coordination that this register proposes is vital. Accidental strikes, which sounds quite innocuous but can be quite serious, cost the UK economy, it's projected, around £2.4 billion every year, with 60,000 incidents. And those incidents can often mean not just the loss of connection, the loss of infrastructure for communities such as ours, but also some quite significant impacts on individuals, on the staff working on those critical infrastructure, some critical safety implications if they haven't got access to up-to-date records of other cables and networking that they might come into contact with, which this register will help alleviate. And we're talking a lot at the moment, there's a lot of discussion in the international media about international security, the integrity of our cables at sea, and rightly so. But I think it's also right that we think about the integrity of our domestic data connection network as well. In terms of the impact on our communities, having been a councillor for 10 years, like many of my colleagues here and opposite, this is one of the issues actually that comes up often in the inbox, the frustration of residents seeing holes dug in roads continuously and seemingly a week later the same piece of road being dug up yet again to look and install another piece of cabling. The system can feel disjointed, uncoordinated, and while this bill won't, well, this clause in the bill won't solve all of that, and it is not meant to, the nature of this bill, I think this is a crucial step along the way of a much better, more rational system for maintaining and monitoring our data and utility infrastructure. And crucially as well, I remember being responsible for regeneration in Camden. One of the crucial issues that stalls development, that stalls the growth of our communities through house building and the delivery of other regeneration projects is often connectivity to infrastructure and to utilities. And certainly this will be helped by the provisions in this bill, enabling companies working on new development sites to more quickly and efficiently understand what infrastructure is already in the ground and how better to connect their own data and utility infrastructure. Crucially, weeks or days of delays on developments can mean millions of pounds to projects and changing viability. So being able to speed up the access to that information, I think, and at the moment it can take around a week sometimes to access the information that is available and to turn that into a usable format. And in a world where time is money, that's a crucial benefit that can be reached. As I said, whilst it's out of the scope of this bill to look at broader changes to the licensing of street use, which I know a number of councils are exploring, or the duty to cooperate between utility companies, any such measures in future in that space will ultimately be underpinned by a common register, by a common series of data. And the provisions that this bill is suggesting are that infrastructure that's going to be vital to those possible changes again in future. In terms of a number of the issues that I thought the Minister perhaps could add some more detail in his response later on, if he's so minded, is on the issue of charging, which he mentioned in his presentation. I think it's entirely reasonable that this shouldn't be a taxpayer-funded registration system, that the providers who are seeking commercial benefits in this space should pay towards the setup and maintenance of this register. But I'd like him perhaps to explore what sorts of considerations may be thought about in the setting of those fees. Particularly, is it an incredibly diverse landscape of providers? There's many people setting up new enterprises setting up in the digital space. And I'd like just to put on record as we come to think about the secondary legislation that will follow, that smaller new entrants to the market won't be prevented from high fees, and that fees, we could perhaps reflect on a fee system that looks at the income and the size and the establishment of the companies. And I know we've received representations from existing providers in the voluntary space around data registration. I think Line Search before UDIG, LSBUD, has made representations in written form to the committee. And I'm certainly sympathetic to their representations. Having tried to fill a void that existed, I can understand why it could be frustrating when they're potentially to outmaneuver them in this space. But would the Minister agree with me that fundamentally we do need a national, consistent system to reap the benefits that this proposal seeks to bring about? But perhaps he might like to touch upon how we are learning about what has worked and what hasn't worked from the current system of private providers providing voluntary and partial regulation and registration. And lastly, just to finish up and sum up, as I know others want to speak, on the issue of cybersecurity, which he touched upon, the Lord's Amendment. Would he agree with me that a national system has the potential for much greater robustness in terms of cybersecurity? The national grid, there's a number of other national infrastructure projects which, through the government's supervision, regulation, involvement, we can have much better assurity about the safety and security of that information than at present, where that information is in a number of forms, in a number of systems, on PDFs, on written and Excel documents across a number of providers and local authorities. So would he perhaps like to touch upon that as well in his response? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm new in the chair, but I know a lot of members are also new to Parliament. Could I remind everybody that we are debating currently Amendment 12. There is there's more opportunity to speak more generally about Clause 56 shortly when we are discussing Clause 57. Anybody wants to speak to Amendment 12 directly, please? Can I remind you? Staff Akron.
Thank you, Mrs. Hobart. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. The member for Uxbridge and South Wrexham may be very interested, given his comments, in the Select Committee hearing tomorrow by the Transport Select Committee into Streetworks. I will stop promoting other committees at that point. Except to say that I've been badgering them because this is a great idea, clearly. I do think that the question around Government Amendment 12 turns on the interpretation of the wording of the amendment. And for instance, I read cybersecurity measures as being the undertaker's cybersecurity measures. In other words, before they get access to the system, the undertakers need to be briefed by the Secretary of State on the cybersecurity measures that they themselves should be taking, as opposed to the cybersecurity measures that exist in the background to the administration of the register, which I agree would be entirely inappropriate to share with other stakeholders. I wonder if I could ask the Minister for his comments on that, on my interpretation of the clause as drafted.
Thank you. On my comments earlier, does anybody want to speak directly to Amendment 12? In that case...
Me.
The Minister.
Well, I should respond to the comments and then we can have the more general debate about it, though I won't repeat the comments I've already made about clause stamp part. So first of all, obviously, the previous version was in the previous version of the bill and didn't include such a provision as was inserted by the members of the Lords. It is extremely unusual in a bill to include requirements for government to refer to security measures and to provide information about security measures to third parties, which is why we're very hesitant. The honourable member is absolutely right. There's an ambiguity here. You could read it in many different ways, which means, of course, that it is potentially justiciable in many different directions, and that leaves government in a difficult place, which is one of the reasons that we're uncomfortable with it. And thirdly, it says, of course, the Secretary of State must provide guidance to relevant stakeholders on cybersecurity measures before they may receive information from NUAR. Well, I presume that the they is the stakeholders rather than the government. But again, why should that be before? None of this makes any logical sense to us as government, which is why we've wanted to remove the clause, or the provision, or the subsection. Yes, of course.
I thank him for giving way. I think he entirely appreciates where we're going in terms of why this amendment's been put in the Lords and the desire for something like this in the face of the bill. Has he got a counter-amendment that he will put forward to satisfy that desire?
No, we haven't, because we think the desire is inappropriate. Obviously, everybody. Why would government want to reveal cybersecurity measures to third parties? It seems an incorrect thing to require government to provide. And as I say, I'm not aware of any other bill, unless the Shadow Minister can think of one, where government is required to provide to third parties information on cybersecurity measures.
So, notwithstanding the question he's just posed to me, I think we're sort of speaking in parallel lines. The purpose of the amendment is to make sure that adequate cybersecurity measures are taken up by parties in terms of accessing it. It's one thing the security around NUAR, but it's also the security around the relevant stakeholders who are using it, hence the before component. But if he's concerned about the way it's drafted on the bill, and by the way, governments provide cybersecurity advice all the time. I'm sure if you go on the DCIT website and the cybersecurity strategy, you can see cybersecurity advice more generally. I don't understand why he's resistant on that. And if he's got an issue with the specific drafting of the clause, will he not come back with a counter-amendment?
Minister.
Well, we don't think it's necessary to put it in the bill at all, which is why we want to take it out. If others want to attempt a different version of the language which is less ambiguous, then they could do so at report stage. But my instinct, apart from anything else, because I think everybody is accepting that the language is ambiguous as to what it precisely means and would require government to provide, what could then be could be determined in a court of law as to whether adequate cybersecurity measures have been provided to, guidance on them have been provided to relevant stakeholders, and who is a relevant stakeholder, etc. I think all of this is yet more reason why we are very unhappy for the subsection to remain in the bill, and that's why we've tabled for it to be removed. I don't think there's anything more I can say on this, but somebody else wants to.
Victoria Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that the main message to come across is the importance of actually the National Underground Asset Register, is the strategic impact that can have, both positive and also how it can be open to cyber attacks, or that question that is increasingly important. I think it does seem that this is an ambiguous amendment, but to call and welcome on some proposal at report stage to look at actually how can we protect the register from cyber attacks is something that should be considered.
Well, yes, but security is at the heart of the whole of the NUAR platform, and it remains an absolute priority for us. So, which is why it feels to me as if the provision that was introduced in the Lords undermines rather than adds to the security of the NUAR. As a digital service in practice, the government intends to work closely with persons who would be able to access information from the NUAR to ensure information is protected. But as I say, we're still pushing our amendment to remove the provision in the bill.
Shadow Minister.
Thank you, and thank you for letting me speak again. I'm not convinced this clause is ambiguous, and in the absence of a counter-amendment or a commitment from the Minister to bring something back to do what I think all of us want in terms of enhanced security in this area, we'll be opposing the government amendment.
Government Amendment 12 proposed to clause 56. The question is that the amendment be made. As many as are of the opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no.
No.
Division.
Division room 11.
Callum Anderson. Aye. Steph Ackroyd.
No vote.
Danny Beals. Aye. Chris Brown.
Aye.
Victoria Collins.
No.
Kate Bearden.
Aye.
Gareth Entwistle.
Aye.
Peter Fortune. No. Just Warrender.
Aye.
Sonia Kumar.
Aye.
Alice MacDonald.
Aye.
Alex McIntyre.
Aye.
Ben Obsojecti.
No.
John Pearce. Joe Robertson.
No.
Singh Josan Gurinder.
Aye.
And Dr. Ben Spencer.
No.
The ayes were 10, the noes were 4, so the ayes have it. The ayes have it unlocked. We now come to clause 56 as amended, stand part with which it will be convenient to also consider schedule 1 and clause 57. The question is that clause 56 as amended stand part of the bill.
I'll just move formally.
Moved formally, the question is that clause 56 as amended stand part of the bill. As many as are of the opinion say aye. Oh. Sorry. I take all of that back. Who wants to speak to amend to clauses 56 schedule 1 and clauses 57? Thank you. I call Alice MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your leadership. I just wanted to take the opportunity to ask a few specific questions on Clause 56. So I do welcome the establishment of the National Underground Asset Register. It's quite unbelievable when you read the detail that we don't indeed already have one. It will obviously help reduce excavation accidents causing traffic jams and safety hazards on our streets. It will also help reduce the costs and the risk posed to construction workers. The Minister in his opening remarks said that I think it would bring 450 million per year to the economy, 4 billion over year. Can you just elaborate on how soon the UK will benefit from those changes? In my constituency of Norwich North, regularly roads are closed, work overruns, whether it's Anglia Water or other providers. Could you just elaborate on the difference that my constituents might feel as a result of this bill going forward? I also understand it from the bill that it will be open to organisations with statutory rights to carry out street works, including highways authorities. In Norfolk, that's the County Council. As you will be aware, there is a whole process around devolution at the moment. Our county, that's a very live discussion, so it may well be that the oversight of that highways authority slightly shifts. So I just wanted to check whether that was still, whether there would be any need to look at that within the bill. I understand, I think, in the Lords that the government indicated that the NUAR could be open to other users in the future, potentially members of the public. I just wondered if you could elaborate slightly on that and whether that would come back through secondary legislation. There's obviously a whole section on fees within here, and I believe it's the Secretary of State who sets that. Again, it would just be helpful if the Minister might be able to elaborate a little bit more on the fee setting process. And indeed, I hope there won't be huge costs on local authorities in terms of rolling out this bill, but just to make sure, just to ask that question here in terms of, thinking of my own county where this might be indicated. So we've had the discussion around the kind of cybersecurity angle, but for me really when I'm thinking and looking at this bill, it's the practical impacts that it will mean for my constituents and others across the country. But I do welcome the intentions, and as I say, it is long overdue to have this register.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and particularly your first chairship. The government has said this bill has 3 core objectives: growing the economy, improving UK public services, making people's lives easier. I believe Part 3 of the bill speaks to all three of these core objectives, but I will focus on the objective of growing the economy in my comments. Underground assets are critical infrastructure. We all rely on them for every aspect of our lives. Our businesses rely on them to be able to communicate and trade. Our NHS and the police and other public services rely on them to keep us all safe. Every aspect of our lives is affected by having this infrastructure in place. And it may be inaccessible, may be hidden from view, but we all know the importance of the infrastructure to our lives. And yet for critical infrastructure, it's quite remarkable that we do not have a comprehensive register of where exactly it is located. The Minister and other colleagues have outlined many of the benefits of creating a national register of underground assets. I absolutely agree with and support the improvements in safety this will bring for workers who will know exactly what to expect when they start work. The ability to minimise asset strikes will not just serve to reduce inconvenience to customers, but will also help save much of the estimated annual cost of £2.4 billion. But most importantly, it will help save lives. But a key aspect for me is the contribution a national register can have on turbocharging growth in our economy, which is illustrated by an example in my Smethwick constituency just over these last few weeks. Residents approached the local council about converting a footpath that already existed to a road carriageway over land owned by the council to improve access to their homes and allow them to park their vehicles on their driveway. This would improve safety and remove vehicles from the highway, thus improving traffic flow. I got involved and asked the council to detail the scheme and the related costs to enable the council to make a decision on the viability of the scheme. Now, after going back and forth over several weeks, we have now received a draft scheme and costs. However, the scheme is destined to remain a draft and the costs cannot be finalised. And despite receiving 5 separate plans from BT, Cadent Gas, National Grid Electricity Distribution, South Staff Water and a plan from Virgin Media and Severn Trent, there still remains a requirement to dig pilot holes to determine exactly what services are present and their depth. So the time taken to get to a detailed scheme is extended, and the cost for doing so is increased, often to be prohibitive. And this is not an isolated situation. Too often contractors are not able to give accurate cost for a project, as there is limited knowledge about the underground assets. The number of different plans using different systems and different scales that planners and contractors end up referring to is time consuming and a recipe for confusion. The current situation too often simply serves to put a dampener on development. I note an additional point, so I note the information required to be provided in the record, in the asset register, is to be set out by regulation. I'd ask the Minister to ensure that information records the depth of services, but also the type of services and the sheathing around them, etc., so that actually there's a full amount of information required for developers. So a single national register would undoubtedly bring benefit to planners and contractors. It would reduce the time taken to bring projects to fruition. It would streamline processes. It would reduce the possibility of accidental asset strikes. It would bring certainty around costs. And these are all clear ingredients for improving growth in the construction sector. And I therefore have no hesitation in supporting these clauses.
Victoria Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chairmanship. On behalf of the Liberal Democrats, councillors and constituents up and down the country, I wanted to highlight our support for this register, National Underground Asset Register. In Harpenden, for example, Station Road has been plagued by flooding, and councillor and constituent and Thames Water and so many different people trying to work out what is going wrong underground, and these are the kind of issues that constituents are coming forward with and councillors and MPs are dealing with, and quite frankly I hope that this will be able to help deal with those. And so I'm asking a question for the Minister is to say, will this also be a register that will help to hold companies like Thames Water to account on how they manage their underground assets and how we can improve the situation for constituents up and down this country?
I think not. I think there's another.
Sonia Kumar.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations on your new position, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. The National Underground Asset Register will form a more comprehensive digital mapping exercise through England, Wales and Northern Ireland. As currently owners are only of buried assets or water electricity companies are only voluntarily sharing their data. This will only just affect customers, but also it will help to share data between assets and excavators. It will save approximately from 6 days to 6 seconds of data, so that actually when the excavators are digging, they're actually able to know where they're digging, and will reduce accidental excavations, which are accounted for about 30% of accidental strikes. My constituency of Dudley, it's plagued by lots of digging going across the constituency, yet still people don't know when's the work going to be complete and when's going to be a new starting of an infrastructure being placed in. So what I'd like to ask the Minister is how will this measure in particular be successful in cost saving, and how will it be rolled out with local authorities?
Thank you very much. First of all, if I respond to the previous conversation, the contributions that were made by my honourable friend for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, and in fact several colleagues have referred to the issue of accidental asset strikes. This is really important part of why we need to do this piece of work. There was a time when, if you had a burst drain or a burst pipe or something like that, that was significant, but it wasn't necessarily a matter of life and death. But nowadays, if you have a major breakage to the broadband service in a local area, that could mean that all the telecare devices in the area aren't going to work, and people will have no ability to protect themselves. They won't be able to ring for help, and that could go on for several days. And that is quite literally, in some cases, a matter of life and death. And anybody who's been a local councillor knows that these issues plague local government endlessly, which is why it's particularly important. As I referred to earlier, I used to be a priest in the Church of England, and I remember there's a very large, I'm not going to name the graveyard, but there's a very large graveyard in the north of England, which used to be managed by a particular sexton who had a rather casual attitude towards his underground register, because he very rarely bothered to dig a grave that was 6 feet deep. He thought that 4 feet was perfectly sufficient. And he quite often sort of judged, because he knew most of the people who ended up being buried in the graveyard, whether they needed a 6-foot hole or a 6'5" hole or whatever it may be. And quite often it meant then that the coffin didn't fit, and you had problems. But this was not so much of a problem, because you could sort that out on the day. The real problem was when you had to find a new space for a new grave. And if you didn't have a proper register of where all the existing graves were, because not everyone is marked by a gravestone, then you had real problems starting to dig up holes, and you found yourself suddenly collapsing in on coffins that weren't 6 feet under. And precisely those set of problems are writ large across the whole of the underground asset register across the whole of the United Kingdom. I don't know whether honourable members have ever been to the torpedo room here in Parliament. Everybody's looking blankly at me, so I guess they haven't. It's the enormous spherical metal object which basically takes everything from all the sewage from in Parliament and spits it every 20 seconds into the main town drain, which is higher than the drain that comes out of Parliament. It's one of our complete vulnerabilities in the Palace of Westminster. If that were to stop working, and it's been there since, I I think 1877, something like that. If it were to stop working, we would be vacating Parliament for a considerable period of time. I've alerted the honourable gentleman who wants to talk about the torpedo route.
I was just reflecting, is that a cybersecurity vulnerability that he's just disclosed to this committee?
Well, it's certainly a vulnerability. And when I was Deputy Leader of the House many years ago, I started the process of restoration and renewal. Lots of people said to me that one of the problems in Parliament was the danger of fire, and that is certainly a problem. And we've done some work on trying to make sure that the risers in the building wouldn't be able to take fire from one part of the building to another very, very rapidly. But I've always said that just as problematic is everything that is underneath the building, both the sewers and, for that matter, all the pipes and the pipe work that carries all the telecommunications networks for us. Parliament simply wouldn't be able to work if there were to be any kind of critical breach there. And that's the point, really. The previous government, I mean, several honourable members, I think it was my honourable friend, said it's a shame that this doesn't already exist, or it's extraordinary that it doesn't exist. And she's absolutely right. It's no particular criticism of the previous government. They've been trying to get this going for some time. I wish it had happened 5, 6, 7 years ago, because then we'd be in a much better place today. Several members have referred to, well, when will we have the economic benefits? Well, there are very dramatic benefits to contractors if they have a swifter process, because they know precisely what they're digging up and why they need to dig it up. I also have the responsibility for the telecoms brief in government, and one of the major problems, I have a fear I might elicit lots of comments from colleagues in a moment, is around the issue of ducts and poles, in that we've tried to say that when people are rolling out gigabit-capable broadband in areas, that operators, undertakers, should be, wherever possible, sharing ducts. But in many places, we simply don't know where there is actually a duct, or whether it's just a duct which has a sleeve that is full already, because it's got all the cabling that could possibly fit in there, or whether, frankly, it's just a buried cable. That's the kind of information that, if we had more reliably, then we'd be able to make much better decisions. Operators would be able to make better investment decisions about how to, where to go fastest, and how they could properly share ducts and poles. It would be beneficial for people in streets who don't have to see their road being dug up repeatedly, for different operators wanting to provide, in essence, the same service. And that is bound to be of financial significance. My honourable friend for Uxbridge and South Ruislip also referred to the advantages of having a national system. He's absolutely right. There's no point in just having a series of different ones all around the country. You have to have a single national system, not least because much of the pipework and cabling doesn't honour the boundaries of local authorities or parliamentary constituencies, however they may be constructed at any one particular time. And this goes to the point that was made by my honourable friend from Norwich North about the devolution, the changing devolution settlement in particular areas. I think that's not a matter for me. I think that's a matter for a different department. But that's why it's so important that we have a national system rather than just individuals. Several colleagues referred to the issue of fees and whether local authorities would have to pay. Well, a local authority would only have to pay if it were a contractor. The whole point of this is that this is about undertakers paying for the NUAR. My honourable friend from Smethwick gave us a classic example of the kind of issue that we really do want to resolve in this kind of situation. And he's a relatively new MP. I've done more than 20 years of having these issues, and it's the kind of bane of an MP's life, because there are relatively few levers that you actually have as a Member of Parliament. Councillors have more responsibility and more levers often to be able to bring about change, though just occasionally a letter with the letters MP and a portcullis on it does somehow still impress some contractors and make them change their view. But he's absolutely right about this will help improve the delivery of public services and help us grow the economy. A member for Harpenden, I think she was making a kind of constituency point, really. On behalf of everyone in the nation. Well, Thames Water doesn't apply across the whole of the nation, though I think Thames Water gets quite a lot of water from Wales, and we're very happy to provide it to you. She makes a good point, and yes, of course, this is part of being able to hold all of those who have underground assets to account, because that's the whole practical aspect of it. My honourable friend for Dudley referred to the issue of digging for infrastructure projects, and as I say, much of the infrastructure that once we thought of as a nice to have is now absolutely critical to people's lives, in particular in relation to broadband connectivity, whether that's a local hospital or a GP's clinic. It simply couldn't survive without a broadband connection, because they wouldn't be able to look at x-rays or be able to run off the labels for blood tests and all the rest of it. Everything is so intrinsically connected that it's really important that we manage to get this secured. Without further ado, I beg to move that the two clauses, the first of them amended by the government amendment, and the second one do stand part of the bill.
The question is that clause 56, as amended, stand part of the bill. As many as are of the opinions aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. We now come to the question on Schedule 1 and Clause 57, which we have just debated. With the leave of the committee, I will take the decision on Schedule 1 and Clause 57 together. The question is that Schedule 1 be the first schedule of the bill, and that Clause 57 stand part of the bill. As many as are of the opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. We now come to Amendment 17, proposed to Clause 58, with which it will be convenient to also consider Amendments 18 to 20. I call Steph Aquaroli to move Amendment 17.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of this whole idea, so much so that I've been bothering other committees about their equivalence of this. What Amendments 17 to 20 are trying to do is provide a bit more availability of the National Underground Asset Register and a little bit more transparency around price to access. And I think other members from the government benches have mentioned this already. As it stands, it gives quite a lot of power and whim to the Secretary of State to use secondary legislation to choose the costs and also place restrictions potentially on access to vital information for many individuals and businesses. Now, the Minister told us this morning that he's not often a fan of secondary legislation, so I hope I might appeal to our shared concern in this area. There are lots of legitimate reasons for access to this data, particularly the benign data, being liberalised. For individuals working on their homes or farmers undertaking work to their land, certainly not a security vulnerability. I don't see why they should be required to be approved by the state and then hand over an indeterminate fee just to access data which the government has collected. For many businesses like builders, plumbers, electrical technicians and a great many more, this would add red tape and costs to their operation. And I know the Chancellor is keen to slash red tape and encourage growth, so if the Minister accepts these amendments, I'm sure he'll be helping the government to achieve just that, and a great way of getting in the good books of number 11. I fear, however, that if we continue with the bill as it stands, maybe wishful thinking, we may find ourselves in a few years in a similar situation to that of the postcode address file. A vast wealth of data which can unlock growth for businesses, locked away behind a paywall, leading to restriction on the ability of business to grow and expand by utilising it. I know that some of the Minister's colleagues on the government benches have begun to break ranks and call for liberation of the postcode address file. Not quite a placard slogan, but an important idea nonetheless. And I don't want him to be facing the same calls a few years down the line for the NUAR. I'm very supportive of the overall aims of the bill, this part of the bill rather, to tackle a problem that frustrates many sectors and individuals in simply not knowing what infrastructure we've buried and where. I hope you can give some consideration to making this a more open and transparent and accessible regime within reason, and might be able to tell us today more about how the government will ensure this.
Amendment 17 to Clause 58, as on the amendment paper, the question is that the amendment be made. Minutes.
I'm speaking essentially to Amendments 17, 18, 19 and 20. which are all in the name of the honourable member, because they, they stand as a group, really. They all seek to do, broadly speaking, the same thing. As has been referred to earlier, there are estimated to be 4 million kilometres of pipes and cables buried underground across the UK, and a hole is dug every 7 seconds to install, fix and maintain the apparatus that is critical in keeping the water running, gas and electricity flowing, and our communications with the outside world connected. The provisions which govern access to information kept in NUAR are established under Clause 56 for England and Wales and Clause 58 for Northern Ireland. These clauses respectively insert Section 106C into the New Roads and Street Works Act 1991 and 45C into the Street Works Northern Ireland in Order 1995. The amendments as tabled would impact the operation of NUAR in Northern Ireland in particular. It should be noted that the equivalent provision to that made by Clause 58 is also made for England and Wales by Clause 56, which we've already agreed. Only amending Clause 58 in this way would lead to inconsistencies in how NUAR is operated. The provisions enabling access to NUAR information have been carefully designed to allow such access to be secure. The existing provision, in relation to Amendment 17, the existing provision set out in Clause 58.3 to insert Article 45C2C in the 1995 order, and the equivalent provision in Clause 56.1 to insert Section 106C2C in the 1991 Act are essential, we would argue, to allow the Secretary of State to establish which exceptions should apply to the sharing of NUAR data with end users of the service. This could, for example, enable the Secretary of State to exempt or otherwise restrict the sharing of data for controlled sites, critical for ensuring that sensitive information regarding these sites is not made available for wider access. I think we need to retain that power. Removing this provision, as he advocates, would mean that NUAR is unable to share information in relation to apparatus without posing a risk to critical national infrastructure. This would limit the platform's ability to share information securely, therefore risking NUAR's operations and the estimated £400 million of benefits per year. Regarding Amendments 18, 19 and 20, there has been significant interest in leveraging NUAR, as I think he effectively suggested, as a national data asset to deliver additional use court cases beyond excavations in the future. Over 200 individuals from nearly 150 different organisations across the public and private sectors have identified over 100 of these potential future use cases for NUAR information. Some of these would require aggregated data across a large spatial area, while some would require detailed data for closely defined locations. For some of these use cases, the information can be provided free at the point of use, while some impact on existing markets, and as such, careful consideration on how fees will be collected and distributed will be required. However, adoption of Amendments 18, 19 and 20 would mean that information held in NUAR is unable to be used to deliver these additional use cases, therefore limiting NUAR's ability to deliver additional benefits and drive growth and innovation across the public and private sectors, and therefore not put me in the good books of the Chancellor as he suggested. It is important to note that research and development is still being undertaken to assess which, if any, of the potential additional use cases may be taken forwards. We envisage such opportunities would only be taken forward where they prove to have significant economic and or social value, taking into consideration the views of stakeholders, including owners of underground apparatus and security stakeholders. I would like to reassure the members of the committee that given the complexity and sensitivity of access to information held in NUAR, these provisions have been drafted under the affirmative procedure, which would provide members the appropriate level of scrutiny over these measures, rather than the negative one, which would mean that they would effectively pass through without any effective say-so from Parliament. With these explanations and noting the risk that these amendments would pose for information security and NUAR's ability to drive economic growth, I hope the honourable gentleman for North Norfolk will be content to withdraw the amendments 17 to 20.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm a big supporter of the affirmative principle approach, so I'm very glad to hear his words. They provide great reassurance. I'm slightly confused about the question of use cases being invalidated by what he said in the middle of his response, but I will come back to them. The main reason I'm proposing to withdraw these amendments is, as he correctly identifies, yeah, you got me. This isn't really just about Northern Ireland, so I will come back at report stage and revise which clauses I'm hitting with my amendments. Thank you so much.
In that case,
Before you, if I might, I should just correct something I said earlier. I was getting my undertakers and my contractors mixed up. I think too much Vickerly had passed. So I said that local authorities would only have to pay if they were a contractor for clause 56. That's wrong. Undertakers will pay for the service, not contractors. But if a local authority is an undertaker, they would need to pay. I'm sure everybody else in the committee noted that I'd made that mistake.
Thank you, Minister, for that correction. I'm sure you've all learned something about undertaking this afternoon. Is everyone content for the amendments to be withdrawn?
Aye.
Yeah.
Amendment by leave withdrawn. We now come to clause 58 stand part, with which it will be convenient to also consider schedule 2 and clause 59. The question is that clause 58 stand part of the bill.
Thank you very much. Well, I don't think I need to speak at great length about clause 58 because we already know that it's all about Northern Ireland and it's not being amended. So I nonetheless beg to move the clause stand part of the bill. Schedule 2 makes the equivalent provision for Northern Ireland as Schedule 1 does for England and Wales. Again, I don't think I need to repeat all those arguments. And then clause 59 updates the Street Works Northern Ireland Order 1995. It makes the equivalent provisions as clause 57 for Northern Ireland. I hope that those are adequate explanations and beg to move the clauses and the schedule. Stand part.
Anyone else wants to speak? Shadow Minister? In that case, the question is that clause 58 stand part of the bill, as many as are of the opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. We now come to the question on Schedule 2 and Clause 59, which we have just debated. With the leave of the committee, I will take the decision on Schedule 2 and Clause 59 together. The question is that Schedule 2 be the second schedule of the bill and that Clause 59 stand part of the bill. As many as are of the opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. We now come to clause 60 stand part. The question is that clause 60 stand part of the bill. Minister.
Thank you. I beg to move the clause 60 stand part of the bill. In essence, it requires a consultation to be undertaken before or after the Act is passed. This will help the Department understand stakeholders' needs and requirements, ensuring their support of and the sustainability of NUAR as a service, and I beg to move that the clause stand part of the bill.
The question is... Oh, Shadow Minister.
Thank you. I think I have to go back to the previous points again. As part of the consultation, will cybersecurity measures be covered?
Minister?
Sorry, he's going to have to repeat that one. I didn't hear it, I'm afraid. Sorry.
No worries. So he's tempted me to ask, as part of this consultation that's being put forward, will cybersecurity measures be considered and consulted on?
I think I'll have to write to him as to whether they're being consulted on. They're certainly being considered by us, but that's a different matter. So I'll have to write to him as to whether we're going to be consulting on them specifically.
Can I just check that anybody wants to speak to this particular section? Please stand. In that case, the question is that clause 60 stand part of the bill, as many as are of the opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. We now come to clause 61 stand part. The question is that clause 61 stand part of the bill. Minister.
Thank you very much. And I think we are considering clauses 61 to 65 and Schedule 3. And I'm begging to move that all of those stand part of the bill. As somebody who's written books, history books, it's always been fascinating to me that it's taken us a very long time to update the system of registration of births and deaths in the United Kingdom. It was only in 1837 that mandatory statutory provision for the registration of births marriages and deaths was introduced in England, and when I was researching a book recently in which I had to try and find a man called John Smith, who was born in roughly 1800, this made for a difficult process. But I'm also conscious that the way that the register is kept these days, if you ever try to find a marriage or a birth or a death online, it's phenomenally difficult. And we make it very difficult for people to register at the moment, and so we are hopeful that this will make things easier for people. The current system of registering births and deaths is outdated, as I said, and is based on paper processes from the 19th century. Clause 61 enables the Registrar General to determine in what form birth and death registers are to be kept. The registers have been paper-based, as I said, since 1837. Although since 2009, registers have captured the information electronically in parallel with the paper registers, which is obviously a duplication of effort. Moving to an electronic register for the registration of births and deaths meets the government commitment to provide better digital public services and will give people a more satisfying experience and their time back. It paves the way for the transformation of the registration service, giving the public more choice in how they register births and deaths in the future, e.g. by telephone or online, but retaining the option of doing so face-to-face. As for Clause 62, it inserts a new Section 11A in the Registration Service Act 1953, which sets out how the council of every non-metropolitan county and metropolitan district must provide and maintain equipment or facilities that the Registrar General considers necessary for a superintendent registrar or registrar to carry out their functions as we move to registering births and deaths in an electronic register. It should be noted that this equipment is already in place in register offices, as births and deaths are already registered electronically in parallel with the paper registers, as I've already said. Clause 63 inserts a new Section 38B into the Births and Deaths Registration Act.
Order, Minister, I'm being told that we are just dealing with Clause 61 rather than Clause 62.
I was under the impression that all of this was grouped. It might be for the convenience of the committee if it were.
I asked a question to the committee. Is it convenient that we are grouping clauses 61, 62, and 63, 64, and 65 together?
Yeah.
In that case, Minister.
As I was saying, Clause 63 inserts a new Section 38B into the Births and Deaths Registration Act 1953, which enables the Minister to make regulations in relation to duties under the Act, to sign the births or deaths register where electronic registers are kept. Regulations under this power will specify the requirements an informant will need to comply with when registering a birth, stillbirth or death. The person who complies with these requirements is to be treated as having signed the register and to have done so in the presence of the registrar. The removal of the requirement for an informant to attend at the register office to sign the register in the presence of the registrar allows us to transform how births and deaths are registered in the future. Regulations made by the Minister under Section 38B will be subject to the affirmative procedure. The Clause 64 covers the treatment of the existing registers of births, stillbirths and deaths. Every superintendent registrar is required to continue to keep any registers of live births or deaths in their custody immediately before the repeal of Section 28 of the 1953 Act comes into force with the records of the office. Any unfilled registers of stillbirths will be deposited with the Registrar General for keeping at the General Register Office. It also specifies how copies of birth and death records which have been held in an electronic format are to be treated following commencement. Where a copy of a register of births or deaths was also kept electronically during the time beginning on the 1st of July 2009 and ending immediately before the day Clause 61 comes into force, the register is to be treated as being kept in electronic form and signatures within it will continue to be effective for the purpose of the Act. Finally, Clause 65 of the Bill introduces Schedule 3. This contains minor and consequential amendments to the Births and Deaths Registration Act 1953, the Registration Service Act 1953, and minor amendments to other acts as a consequence of the move from paper registers to the registration of births and deaths in an electronic register. All of these provisions were, of course, in previous iterations of the bill.
Thank you. The question is that Clause 61 stand part of the bill. I call the Shadow Minister, Dr. Ben Spencer.
Thank you. And just building on the last point of the Minister, I'm glad that in the current incarnation of various data bills we have these provisions going forward. I think it's one of the things that make this bill so interesting, that it's just a panoply of different areas of correction and improvement. Perhaps what's most surprising about this particular area of change with regards to the electronic register of births and deaths is that it is so old, our current system, and hasn't been done before. Of course, we're very much supportive of this and look forward to it getting in action.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and congratulations on chairing a bill committee for the first time. I think it's a great development to have electronic versions of the register of births and deaths, and I absolutely welcome such a step. It's going to increase efficiency because we'll be able to have timely updates. We'll speed up the registration process of information, and it will also make these records very accessible and improve service delivery, so my constituents hopefully will not have to attend the office in order to get certificates, and reducing duplication is obviously going to be cost effective, reducing the cost of storage and printing and administration. The other benefit is of course of security, because with digital systems you can have encrypted systems and backup systems which will increase security. In my previous job working as a lawyer, where I often had to inspect death certificates, it sometimes became an issue that certificates were not accurate. And I would like to ask the Minister, if I may, whether having an electronic version may actually improve the accuracy of these documents. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder if I could ask the Minister for his specific clarification on whether he thinks that these provisions will improve or solve for the situation where an unmarried parent tragically dies before the birth of their child. Will this make it easier for their parenthood to be entered onto the birth certificate? It's something which the member for South West Devon has had an German debate about recently, and it's a large matter for a small but distributed number of people.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no education for the bill, or the part of the bill, simplifying the education. Particularly behind it, where people will get to make that simpler, there's a lot to be said for that. But I think there's also having records, improved records online, can help in terms of improving public policy plans for policy in the future. If our real house records really important, going back to changes that are required and transfer all that, and be helpful. In addition to that, being able to prove your identity without having to carry paper documents around is an important thing. And we do a lot of things online now, and to be able to then improve those processes is important as well. And perhaps the Minister could also comment on, I think there's probably other aspects of public policy which could be improved through this as well. If you have a register of births online, which is accurate, then could that then also help making, for example, the process to voter registration easier? Because if you know when people are going to be turning 18, well, actually, rather than having people fill in forms like they do now, having an automatic system of voter registration could be much simplified as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm grateful for the Minister agreeing with the legislation that was in the previous government's bill. He's absolutely right. Some of this stuff is stuff that we should have been doing a very long time ago. It strikes me too, somebody who, one of the members for Doncaster said to me the other day that the Doncaster Hospital still has 42 people who are solely employed in carrying physical medical records around the hospital. And that's just an utter madness in a modern day NHS. How on earth can you possibly be able to transfer data? How can you have access to your blood tests and all the rest of it if it's not digitally available? Sorry?
I think we're dealing with those provisions a bit later on.
I know we're dealing with those provisions later on in the bill, indeed. But, I mean, it's very similar here. And I know we don't often individually come up against births, deaths and deaths registrations many times in our lives. But when you do, you want it to be as simple a process as it possibly can be. Often, you know, there are very difficult emotional moments for people. And I'm very struck. My father died in October last year, and the process of dealing with probate and with guardianships and with banks and so on is a version of hell, which we really need to rectify. And some of this should be able to be assisted by digital verification services. Some of this should be able to be assisted by these clauses that we're putting in the bill. My honourable friend for Wolverhampton North is absolutely right about improving accuracy. Because, funnily enough, people's handwriting is not always legible. This includes some people sitting to my left. It is simply a fact that sometimes when people have written things on death certificates and on registrations of birth and birth certificates, it's quite difficult to tell what the precise word is that was written in somebody else's handwriting, and so greater accuracy, I think, will help considerably. The member for Norfolk, again, I think that's my second or maybe my third letter that I'm going to have to write, which I don't know the precise details about the question he asked, and it's a very legitimate question, so I will write to him. A my honourable friend from Smethwick quite rightly makes the point about, it would be phenomenally useful to have more timely registration and be able to have more coherent data springing from digital registration. And that is one of the benefits that we do think that we will be able to accrue from this legislation. So without further ado, I beg to move that those clauses do stand part of the bill.
We have debated clauses 62 to... Here we go. The question is that clause 61 stand part of the bill, as many as are of the opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Now we have debated clauses 62 to 65 as well, plus schedule 3. With the leave of the committee, I shall put those questions together. The question is that clause 62 to 65 plus schedule 3 stand part of the bill. As many as are of the opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. We now come to...
I beg to move that the committee vary the resolution of the programmes committee by deleting paragraph 1b.
The question is... the question is that the committee vary the programme. As many of these of the opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it.
I beg to move that the committee be now adjourned.
The question is that the committee be now adjourned, as many of the opinion say aye. Aye. Adjourned when we are sitting again on Tuesday. The committee is adjourned until Tuesday, the 11th of March.
Room 11, sound.